All right, so the purpose, hi, I'm John Buday, and we're going to talk about the Timber Framers Guild, its involvement with the Japanese American Memorial on Bainbridge Island, and a little bit about timber framing and the Guild, the project that we did here. First, I'm going to talk about the Timber Framers Guild, formed in 1988, I think. Currently has just about 1,800 members. I'm a member. Most of the timber framing I should define, and I will. So I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to refute it. Timber framing is a distinctive style of building construction in which heavy timbers frame the structure instead of more slender dimensional lumber, for example 2x6s. Timber framing was a building practice used throughout the world until roughly 1900, when the demand for cheap, fast housing brought dimensional lumber to the construction forefront. In the 1970s, craftsmen revived the timber framing tradition in the United States and have ushered the design style into the modern era. So my refutation, or I guess modification of that, is that in the first place, timber framing was done not because they really loved the joinery. It was because fabrication of steel was also by hand. It was very expensive. It made much more sense to form the wood and join the wood together, because they didn't have any kind of metal fastener. Was very prohibitively expensive. They didn't have bolts. They didn't even have spikes. They didn't have, it's not that these things were not available. They were just very expensive. So the tradition, west, east, was to shape the wood in a way that the wood joined together. That's where that came from. And what really made it wasn't just, obviously there was always a need for cheap housing. What really made that happen was machine cut nails. The metal fasteners became cheap enough that it went over the line. It went the other way. The sawmills were already efficient enough to cut small sticks in a way that made that efficient. It was the machine cut nails that killed timber framing. So now, because timber framing is no longer needed, it's an art. And the Guild, and about the craftsmen reviving it, it's actually kind of an interesting story. It was these guys in the Midwest and East who were deconstructing old barns and looking at what they were deconstructing and saying, what is this? And then they from that started to have an understanding of what they were looking at and wanted to do this thing new. So that's where the revival came from in the United States. Although in Europe, there are places where it never ended. And in Japan, there are places where it never ended. Here in the land of cheap goods, the nails pushed it out. So, the Guild does public projects pretty much all over the world. I'm gonna give you a quick run through of a few. And I'm going to butcher this. Gwozdzik synagogue roof in Poland, which was a reconstruction of a synagogue lost in Warsaw that was reconstructed, and Guild members took part in that. A huge timber frame covered bridge in Guelph, Ontario. One that's near to my heart, which was a visitor center in Sept, BC. It's near my heart because that was the first timber frame project I ever got involved in 2002. Then the next one I want to bring up, there's a Japanese tea house that was done as a part of a guild conference in Pacific Grove, California. That one is what introduced me to some of the people doing or working in the Japanese tradition within the guild, and that led to a conversation which led to our contacting BIJAC and getting involved with this project in about 2002, which was very serendipitous because it was in the early planning stages. So, you know, getting involved at that point allowed for timber framing to be a part of the planning rather than being a adjunct or a modification of what had already been planned. We've done work in Pemberton, BC, work all over the East Coast and Midwest, did a visitor center in Suriname, and one of our most recent is Oso Memorial. Oh no.